Okay, here we go. I just wanted to point out, last week I spoke about the fact that essentially when the Torah finishes with the role of a particular individual, they're just taken off out of the scenery. You don't want to pay any actors if they're not necessary for the play while they're just being silent elsewhere. So we'll see how that plays out in just a minute, because this week's Torah portion, Parsha Toldot, begins with the words Eile Toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham. Now, the word Toldot it can mean two things. It can mean the generations, the offspring of someone, or it can mean the deeds, the story of someone. The Art Scroll chooses to translate it the offspring of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham gave birth to Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rivka for daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Padan Aram, as his sister of Lavan, the Aramean, to him for a wife. And so Isaac prays for Rivka on one side of the room, and she's on the other side because she's barren. And then we have the story that she becomes pregnant. Once again, this idea of the hero coming into being only after difficulty of the mother's pregnancy, a common theme I mentioned before. And but what happens? She's pregnant with twins. Esau, and Yaakov, Jacob. And they struggle. It says literally, what is it? The children agitated within her. They struggled. Now we're going to see, when they're born, we're going to have two sons. They're fraternal twins, not genetic twins. And Jacob, later also called Israel, the ancestor of the Jewish people. Esav, Edom, is the ancestor of the Edomites and other tribes according to the biblical account. But in rabbinic tradition, Edom, perhaps because it sounds almost like Roma, Edom, becomes associated with Rome. And the rabbis, when they wanted to say something nasty about Rome, or later on the Roman Empire, which had become Christian, they would say something about Edom, about Esau. Convenient way to malign your opponents without saying them directly. So we see that Esau carries a bit extra burden. While he's not necessarily the greatest character in the world, we see that the rabbis really piled onto him all kinds of things. So that, for example, right now, all it says in the Torah is that there's some kind of agitation going on within her. Pregnancy is giving her difficulties. And so according to rabbinic traditions, because the two brothers were struggling with each other. And whenever they went by a house of idolatry, a Beit Avodah Zarah, Esau tried to get out. He tried to go to the idolatrous world. On the other hand, when they passed the school of Shem V'Ever, this mythical yeshiva that exists from the time of the sons of Noah, from Shem, Jacob wanted to come out. And so that this struggle that they have in the womb becomes a struggle throughout history. The Torah says that where is it? He goes to consult someone, and God says to her, according to this, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 regimes from your inside shall be separated. The might shall pass from one regime to the other. The elder shall serve the younger. And so the way the rabbis word it, when Esau is up, when Rome is up, Israel is down. When Israel is up, Esau is down. It's the idea of this contrast, this conflict between Israel and Rome. Now, we are then told after their birth, in their description, how Esau is all ruddy and hairy, and Jacob is holding on to the heel of his brother. So he's called Yaakov, which comes from the word heel, or to follow in the path of somebody else. Akev means to replace someone. We're told a story. It says, I apologize, I've been having some eye issues. The lads grew up and Esau became one who knows hunting, a man of the field. But Jacob was a wholesome man, abiding in tents. Isaac loved Esau, for game was in his mouth, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So we see here the roots of conflict in the family where the two parents don't love their two children equally. Isaac favors Esau, while Rebekah favors Jacob. And then it says, Jacob simmered a stew, a pottage, and Esau came in from the field. He was exhausted. Esau said to Jacob, pour into me now some of that very red stuff, for I am exhausted. He therefore called his name Edom. And Jacob said, sell as this day your birthright to me. And Esau said, look, I'm going to die. So what use to me is a birthright? Jacob said, swear to me this day. He swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and got up and left. Thus Esau spurned the birthright. Well, first of all, the story itself right here is not very complimentary of Esau. He's coming in from the field. He says he's hungry in kind of a very exaggerated way. But Jacob is not exactly being so nice either. And he says, yeah, I'll give you something to eat if you sell me your birthright. So, which means to take the place of their father Isaac, at least as the rabbis understood it, in the sense of ultimately founding the Jewish people, the Jewish religion, and worshiping the one God. Now, the reason I have the chart on here and why I think it's important to help to clarify things. I didn't do the whole everybody from creation, but if you start with the day 0 as the creation date for the world, as the rabbinic tradition was, Noah was born in the year 1056 after the creation. His son Shem is born in 1558. Nahor, which was a couple of generations down, which is Abraham's grandfather, was born in the year 1800. Terach was born in the year 1878. And then Abraham is born, and so interestingly enough, in the year 1948 from the creation of the world. But what is interesting to note, that when Abraham is born, Noah is still living, Shem is still living, Nahor is still living, and Terach, of course, is still living. And Abraham goes to the land of Canaan when he was 70 years of age. All right, he says in the Torah, just to quote it for you, in Lech Lecha. Avraham ben Chamesh Shanim Shivim Shanim, 75 years of age when he left Haran. So if he's 75 years of age when he leaves Haran, and we're already been told that Terach has died, but look, 75 and 48 is 2023. And Terach doesn't die until here, which is after the birth of Isaac, actually. Okay. And then when we look to Abraham's lifespan, notice that Jacob and Esau are born in the year 2108. And Abraham dies in the year 2123. So Abraham is 15 years of age when Jacob is 15 years old before his grandfather Abraham dies. And so the rabbis, noting this and noting that the two young Esau and Jacob seem somewhat adult-like in the story of the selling of the birthright, that this was the day that Abraham died, and that there's a Jewish tradition of serving foods that are round after a funeral. And so the lentil stew that he gave to his father Isaac, that he was cooking, was for his father Isaac, because he had come back from burying Abraham. So I just wanted to see concretely how the ages overlap, but we were told about the death of Terach way before we were told about the birth of Isaac. And we were told about the death of Abraham well before we're told about the birth of Jacob. So that is part and parcel of what we find happening throughout the Torah. So anyway, we're told how there's a famine. Isaac goes down to the land of the Philistines. Seems anachronistic at that point. There were no Philistines in that part of the world yet, but the area that was to become known as the land of the Philistines has a similar episode with the king Avimelech that his grandfather and Sarah had with Pharaoh and with another Avimelech, in which they pretend to be brother and sister, and that raises all kinds of questions I don't have time to go into. But the major impact that we get later on, after we're told about Isaac having difficulties with Avimelech's people, etc., Isaac is blind. He's blind due to age, which is certainly a very common occurrence in the ancient world. He wants to bless his sons, so he decides to bless Esau, his eldest son, to give him the blessing. And Rebekah does not want that to happen. So Isaac sends Esau out to go hunt some game to feed him. And in the meantime, Rivkah says to Jacob, you're going to pretend to be your brother. She dresses him up in hide from a sheep, so his hands feel like they are woolly, harsh. She reassures Jacob that nothing will happen to him, and that if there's she will be responsible. Sure enough, he goes in. Isaac is not 100% clear if Isaac is fooled by this. You look at the text yourself and go through it. And if you get a chance, and you decide whether or not Isaac knew what was going on or not. It's not 100% clear that he was fooled. But in any case, he gives Jacob the blessing. In the ancient world, the idea of the birthright and the idea of the blessing were very significant. All right. And so after Jacob finishes getting the blessing from his father, Isaac, and he goes out, it says, Jacob was scarcely left from the presence of Isaac, his father, that Esau's brother came back from the hunt. He too made delicacies, brought them to his father, and said to his father, let my father rise and eat of his son's game, so that your soul will bless me. And then Isaac trembles, and because he asks, who are you? And he says, I'm Esau. And he says, who was the one who came before you? I took all that you had for, where is the one who hunted game, brought it to me, and I partook of all when you had not yet come. And I blessed him. Indeed, he shall remain blessed. When Esau heard his father's words, he cried out an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me too, father. But he said, your brother came with cleverness and took your blessing. And he said, it is because his name was Jacob that he outwitted me these two times, Yaakov to usurp, to come in the place of, He took away my birthright. Notice how he words it. He took away my birthright. Esau sold it. But in Esau's mind, Jacob took it away from him, just like he took the blessing. And so Isaac does, in the end, give him a kind of a blessing. And then Esau says in his heart, may the days of mourning for my father draw near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. And so Rebekah hears of it, and so she sends Isaac back to her family to find a wife. She's not very happy with that. Situation, right? With his wives, and so he sends them off to go to Padan Aram, and that, of course, is next week's Torah portion, and we'll have to wait until then to see that. Okay, just want to stop that for a moment. Okay, so I hope everybody got in the mail the latest copies of the Hebrew that we're going to do tonight. Some of you have been able to pick up your books. I'm very happy for that. Those of you who haven't, it'd be nice, those who can make it, to do so. But in any case, we will screen, where far the screen? Okay. Page 11. I apologize, this is still from the my coffee spill. All right. We've learned a number of letters so far, and it's easy to relate to them for the most part when you think about their English equivalents, the Latin alphabet. Tonight, we're going to start with the letter Yud. The letter Yud works the same way in Hebrew that the letter Y works in English. It's pronounced like a Y. So in front of a vowel, like the first example here, it would be Ya. But after a vowel, the vowel, it sort of loses its sound to some extent. It gets absorbed in the previous vowel, as we in the ahs and the e's. We'll see that in a few minutes, okay? So right now, we have the letter Yud. The Yud is a small letter, the smallest of the letters. The Pintel Yid, the little Yud, sometimes used in folk sayings about as the Jew, the Pintel Yid, the little Jew. All right. So I want everybody to unmute, dismute yourselves. When I can see some people haven't yet done so, but come on, guys. All right. So we start with line number 1. We have Ya.
Yeah.
Just squeeze here.
Yeah.
Ya.
You.
Okay. Line number 2. Ya. Yach. Yar.
Yeah.
Yapa. Right. Now this syllable, Yud Hey, is often found at the end of names. And it's a short way of saying God's name. And we'll see that in the biblical names. All right. So there are some who are very careful not to even pronounce this Yah here, unless you're talking about God. But we are going to, because we need to practice. Okay. All right. Line number 3. Yah. Yarach. Yachar. Yuchar. Yara. Yabu. Yarbu, Yarhu. Okay, so now it says here, when Yud follows a vowel, it intensifies the sound of the vowel and is treated like part of the vowel. For example, Kamatz Yud, Patach Yud, is pronounced like the A in the Hebrew L'chaim, I. Well, like I, not A. L'chai, I. All right. So let's see it here on line number 5. We have by, I, tie, right, rabbi. Rabbi is a different word. No, it would be with a kamatz in the front, but that's okay. That is the source of the word for rabbi. Okay, 6. Barai, achai, rabbi, burai. Okay. All right, now, as I've mentioned, the Yud Hey Vav Hey, right, that's God's name according to our tradition. Okay, and when we read it, Yud Hey Vav Hey, we're always going to pronounce it as Adonai. When one is learning Torah, one is theoretically allowed to say it, but normally we don't pronounce it unless we're saying a blessing or we're actually doing the Torah reading as part of the Torah service. And that's where the famous name of God of Hashem comes in. It's been much more popular in the recent generations. Hashem means the name. Right? So it is just substituting for pronouncing the name of God by saying, I'm going to say the name of God. Now, one of the interesting things about all of this is that while we don't know 100% how the Yud Hey Vav Hey was pronounced, we can guess at it, but we also know that it was not normally pronounced by people, except on Yom Kippur by the Kohen Gadol during the temple service. And the substitution of Adonai became very prevalent in Jewish circles. So Adonai is already a substitute for the pronunciation of the actual name of God. Okay, so we have a substitute for the Yud Hey Vav Hey. Now that substitute becomes holy, and people don't want to pronounce it. So we substitute for the name of God. Okay, so instead of saying Adonai, people will say Adashem, or they'll say Hashem. I'm sure in another 300-400 years, Hashem will become holy, and we're going to have a new euphemism instead of saying Hashem. You can quote me on that in about 300 or 400 years if you're around for that. Okay, but frequently, I think it's a little less frequent these days, but frequently the name of God would be spelled with 2 yuds like this when it's got the vowels with it. So we always pronounce it Adonai. These 2 vowels, it's a complicated explanation, but they come from the word Adonai, the actual word. So when we come to this blessing, the beginning of a blessing, the beginning of every bracha, beginning of every blessing, you should all be able to do this now. Okay? So we're going to read together. All right? Unmute. Say Baruch Atah Adonai. All right. Just by the way, I often end up using a more Ashkenazis pronunciation. I apologize for that. A good Sephardi will say Adonai. An Ashkenazi we say when it's talking about God, Adonai. All sound with it. And I was once caught by somebody saying, you do both ways, right? And Actually, I was listening to one rabbi the other day saying the correct pronunciation was not the way I think you're supposed to pronounce it. But anyway, and neither here nor there. Okay, let's go on to the next page. So we have a big review here. Okay, so let's catch our breath and prepare for words ahead. Okay, let's begin. We have Barai, Rabbi, Yerachai, Bechurai, Abai, and I. Line 2. Hi, Ya, Haya, Hi, you, Hayu. All right, line number 3. Barach, Har, B'cha, Har B'cha. Okay, that's a little, we're getting more syllables in there, more syllables. Okay, line number 4. Yabach, Rabcha, Yarucha, Arucha, Yabuch. Line 5. Ata, Baruch, Adonai, Haya, Yeruch. Line number 6. Bahai, Beharai, Arbacha. Somebody's right. Tar, and Tarbut.
Can you just like go over that line again?
Sure. I'll do it slowly. Okay. Bahai, Beharai, Arbecha, not Becha, Becha, Arbecha, Tar, Tarbut. Right. If anybody's really interested in the grammar, this is a short syllable here. This part, that's short vowel. So that's the syllable, tar. Since there's no vowel sound in front of the bet, there's a dot in the bet, boot, tar, boot. Right? If you can remember the fact that this is a short vowel and connects with the next letter after it, that can help you on the reading, but it's a step up for you to work on that. Okay, line number 7. Okay, Yar, I notice these two words are pronounced the same way, but they're not the same. Right? Yarbecha and Yarbecha, that's the difference, okay? Line number 9. Atara, Atarai, Urai, and Turcha. Okay. All right, it's time for another vowel. the segel. Okay. The segel is 3 dots, upside down triangle form, right? So it's those 3 dots, that's as it says as an etrog. Okay, and if you know the word etrog, all right. Ever, Esther, Evelyn, that's the E, the S sound, okay? All right, someone like the egg, okay. Line number 1. Be,
Re,
be,
re,
ge, ge.
re,
Line 2. Reb,
reb,
bet,
bet,
eret,
ere,
tat,
ta,
and becha, 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 not becha, but becha.
Hard for me to see them.
So what was the second last one there?
Tet,
Okay, that's what I thought. Sorry, I heard something
Okay.
else, but
Okay,
yeah.
now-
Okay, tet.
yeah. There's a rule of pronunciation you just have to memorize. And that is when you have a word with the 2 segels like this in erech, the accent is not going to be on the last syllable. It shifts up. Erech. Not erech, but erech. All right. The accent shifts 1 syllable up.
Focus on the big.
So if you look at that's all practice on line number 3. So line number 3, we're going to accent the first syllable of each one of these words. Okay. Line 3, first word is rechet,
Rechet,
techet,
techet,
teret,
teret,
beret,
teret,
beret. All right, line number 4. Harechet,
rechet,
arbe, arba,
arbe,
harbe.
harbe,
Okay, line number 5.
yarbe,
Yarbe, arche,
arche,
arechet,
areche,
tabachet. And actually, well, that's a rule why that's gonna sound there. We're not gonna worry about it. Line number 6. Harechet,
areche,
barchu,
barchu,
berech,
berech,
barcha.
barcha.
All right, so,
I can ask a question.
yeah, of course.
I think on line 3, you were mentioning how the accent should be on the first syllable versus
Well, no, it should be, normally in Hebrew, the accent's on the ultimate syllable, the last syllable.
right.
When you have a double segol, it becomes the penultimate. Not the first syllable. These are just 2 syllable words, so it becomes the first syllable. But the better way to remember it is the next to last syllable.
Okay, so when you have 2 of them together, you put the accent on the next to last syllable?
Correct. But there are only 2 syllables here on line 3, right? So rechet. Here on line 4, harechet. Okay, again, it's not the first syllable, it's the second syllable, harechet.
Yeah.
Well, there's no issues there. Okay, that clarify it?
Yeah, thank
Clear
you.
as mud, as I said when I was growing up.
Clear.
Clearer than mud. Clear as mud, y'all. Okay. My southern roots. Okay, but they've been turned white now from my original roots. Okay. The letter lamed. You may hear it sounds like lambda. from Greek. All right, it's an L, it's always an L. Always has the same sound as an L. Hebrew letters or names all begin with the sound of the letter. All right. So line number 1, let's go through it. We have la, 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 lu, eh. Yeah, there was a note, I didn't read it with you on the previous page, but this is also pronounced eh, with those 2 little dots there. Okay. There's a reason for it. Maybe when I feel long-winded, I'll explain it another time. Line number 2. Tal, tu, lucha, lu, labat. That's to the daughter, not the beer. Line number 3. Talu, babul, liraba, arbel, el. Like an el al. Line number 4.
Is that,
Lechet. Yeah.
okay.
Was there a question? Somebody had a
So
question?
I was just asking the L at the end of number 3 there, is that also the L like as in God as well?
No. That would be
Oh, okay.
different vowel. That would have a Seira under it.
Okay.
Al. It's L. Although Israelis would pronounce it as L the same way.
Okay.
Okay. But it actually in the way we teach it here, most people learn it as the Seira vowel as A, not the Israeli pronunciation of E, although both of them could be correct. Okay, line number 4. Lechet, barrel, turat, baruchu. Line number 5. Halechet, halacha, halach, halach, lelechet, lelechet. There's the 2 segels there. Lelechet. Line 6. Bulach, bulach, bihar, harbut, aruch, ata. Line 7. Talech, balechet, telchu, belachat, lealtar.
The altar.
Lealtar. Immediately, the altar. Post haste. All right. It's getting a little more difficult as we get more words and more letters and more vowels. And as I tell everybody, the only solution is practice. All right. This evening, we're supposed to talk about prayer. And first of all, when we look at the Bible, we have references to people praying under certain circumstances. This morning, the Torah portion I talked about today, for this coming weekend, uses the word vayater, that Rebecca and Isaac entreated God. That's prayer. Prayer is any time you voice your desire to God. Now, we know also when we look at the Bible, though, we see that the normative way of worshiping God for ancient Israel was a sacrificial system. We don't know if and when prayers were said along with that. We know by the time of the Second Temple, it's recorded that the Psalms were recited during the sacrificial service. I know some scholars argue as to whether or not they were recited during the first temple period. That's not our issue. And by the time that the temple is destroyed and the synagogue comes into being, the prayer service had already come into being, a formal idea that we pray to God daily. Maimonides famously discusses the concept of prayer. It has a couple of important points that he makes. First, he tries to explain how it is that we moved from the sacrificial system to prayer, when for Maimonides, prayer itself is not on the same level as philosophical speculation, meditation. He felt that that was really the highest order. And that's even superior to prayer. Because in prayer, we're asking God for things, we're praising God, stuff like that. We're not contemplating God's reality. So why, according to Maimonides, didn't we start with prayer? Well, first of all, the first question is, why did we have prayer instead of sacrifices? I'm getting it wrong. Why didn't God eliminate sacrifices
Where's the system?
or at least go straight to prayer?
That made sense to you?
Did the question make sense?
We're doing it as if we're married,
We're
right?
doing it together.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're doing it.
we're gonna get married, so.
Somebody's got a cross conversation there that I'm not sure they want the rest of us to hear or not.
Oops.
If you're going to have a cross conference, mute yourselves, unless you really want to share who's getting married soon anyway. Okay. Where was I? Okay, prayer. I started on the wrong foot. I'm going to start back again. Okay. Ancient Israel worshiped God through sacrifices. Maimonides, a rationalist, understood that God, the divine, does not need sacrifices. The ancient peoples, the pagans, often believed that the gods needed those sacrifices. In some way, they fed the gods. The famous Enuma Elish, which contains a story similar to the story of Noah's and the ark and the flood, describes after the flood in that story, Utnapishtim, the hero, offers sacrifices to the gods, and they hover around the smoke like flies. They regretted they had killed humanity because they had nobody to give them sacrifices anymore. So many of the ancients really believed that the sacrifices served a real purpose for the gods. Maimonides did not believe that at all. And he felt that the sacrifices were merely symbolisms, symbolic. For example, a sin offering, when you did something wrong, you should have died for that sin that you committed. But instead, an animal and its blood is sacrificed in place of you. So why did God keep the sacrificial system in the Torah? He says because that's how our ancestors worshiped God or gods in the past. That's how they knew to worship the divine. If you ask them now to skip over from that to prayer, much less meditation, they would spend so much time trying to understand this newfound invention called prayer that they would miss the most important point, which is that there's but one God, one divinity, not a multiplicity of divinities. So it's for Maimonides, sacrifices was kind of, what can I do? You know, these are people can only go so far. You can't change 180 degrees in overnight. It takes time. The Ramban Nachmanides, a couple of generations later, took issue with the Rambam and said that there is a purpose to the sacrifices, and it's a mystical explanation. Not that God needs sacrifices, God forbid, but he felt that they had import above and beyond symbolism. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is, why do we have set formalized prayers? The rabbis throughout the Talmud and later sources make clear that just mouthing words without meaning them is not really the way to worship God. You have to mean it. You have to be into it. You have to feel the words. The word in Hebrew, we say you have to have kavanah, intent, which includes meaning, direction, contemplation. You have to really be into the words you're saying. And when that, that's not always possible. When you say the same words day in and day out, how can you always have the proper intent, the proper kavanah? So the Rambam Maimonides suggests the problem is we don't want to talk to God like we do to our next door neighbor. We need to talk in a more formal, after all, if you're going in front of the King of Kings, you're not going to say to King Charles, that was Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. You're not going to say, hey, Betty, how you doing today? Right? You have a way of addressing her, Your Majesty. You don't use her name. Right? There's a formal way because you're here and she's up here. Well, if you do that with a Basar Vadam, a human being, all the more so we should approach God in a more serious manner. And therefore he says that the rabbis of the great synagogue, Knesset HaGedolah, the great assembly that the Talmud says created the prayer system that we use, they created a system for us to use, and they had the ability, the poetics, to create a format for us. Going back in ancient history, when I was a camper at Camp Ramah, we're talking about over 50 years ago, getting closer to 60. Anyway, there was a lot of push on, creative prayer. That was a big thing in those days, and it still is in some circles. And so, along with our standard prayers, we were asked to, create our own prayers, and people did. And what you discover is that people, when they create their own prayers, they can't create a new prayer every day. They end up saying the same thing. The rote words, because it's hard to be creative, to be truly creative and to meaningful every single day of your life. So a formalized prayer service gives us words so we don't have to look for them. Certainly when we have something we want to say personally, we're allowed to do so. In matter of fact, the rabbi said you really should always add your own words to the prayer service. You shouldn't be just merely reciting the words of the Siddur. And there are places in the prayer service where we are told that, for example, when we talk about the sick, if we have somebody that we want to pray for specifically, that's a good place to say it. Heal my beloved friend, my mother, my cousin, whomever it may be. So there is room for the creativity of the individual and adding yourself to it. But we know that if we were left to our own devices, and we only pray, and we prayed when we felt like it. I pray when I feel like it. How often am I going to really pray? But if I pray all of the time or regularly, when I need to pray, I have that avenue available to me. So that's one of the explanations for why we have a formal prayer service in that way. Furthermore, it helps create community. A lot of things we do in Judaism are around community. Certain prayers cannot be recited without the presence of a minyan, means without the presence of a community. You can say other prayers by yourself, but the prayers that are considered to be the most important davar shebekadusha, the most sanctified aspects of the service, require a minyan. And minyan means you have to have a community. And I'll repeat it, the pandemic is one of the affects Jews and Jewish life much harsher than many other religious approaches, because we need community. That's how we make our life, our religious life, as part of a community. All right? Now, the building block of Jewish prayer, we actually now have already read some of the words that we use. Right? The very basic format of a bracha, of a blessing, begins with the words Baruch Atah Adonai. Right? And each one of those has some issues with it. I mentioned before Baruch. How do we understand the word Baruch? Blessed, that's how Koren translates it. Art scroll, since I just have one here handy. Blessed are you. They both use blessed. Do I have another Siddur English translation right here? No. Some say praised. Okay. Others, as I suggested, there is a modern attempt to suggest it's descriptive. God is the source of blessing, or wellspring of blessing are you. Okay. So the person offering the bracha, offering the blessing, begins with a statement of praise of God in some form or matter. Either you translate as blessed, source of blessing, praised. Then we go to the second person, you. We're directing our thoughts to God directly. Now, Hebrew uses masculine and feminine all the time. There is no neutral or neuter as they have in Latin wording. So atah is masculine. Most of the time, God is described in masculine terms. There are certainly some terms that are feminine, but in general, we use the masculine, and that goes back to human history, how the masculine language was always associated with power and strength. But it does not mean that God is either male or female. Male and female is only something about that comes into being because of reproduction. God is but one. There's no need for God to be male or female. That's not just apologetics. That's the reality. Again, quote the Rambam, Maimonides says we have to remember, God, the divine, is totally unique, unlike anything else in all of existence. Now that's hard to comprehend. It moves God away from us to a certain extent, makes God transcendent. But then what do? We say, Baruch, you are the source of blessing. You are something out there. But then we say you, like I'm talking to you. And then, so we know for sure who we're talking about. We go to the third person, Adonai, God's name. And if indeed the Yud Hey Vav Hey has the meaning of being, which some suggest it does, we're praising or recognizing you, the source of being, the source of blessing. Then normally on most brachot, most prayer blessings, we then continue Eloheinu, Eloheinu means our God. It's a combination of the word Elohim and Shalanu, ours. Eloheinu in that format is a biblical way of expressing possession. Our God. It is a plural word, just like in the beginning of Genesis, Bereshit, bara Elohim et hashamayim v'ator. It's in the beginning God created heaven and earth, but the word Elohim is a plural word. But all of the verbs associated with it are always singular. So Elohim, our God, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu, our God and the God of our ancestors. That's how the Amidah begins. When we are saying a bracha for, say, like for food, Kiddush, we don't go straight into Eloheinu. We start by recognizing God is the sovereign, is the king. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Our God, king of the universe, sovereign of the universe. So we also take in the opening words of the bracha the assumption that God is the absolute ruler. We owe obedience to the divine. The divine is our God, our king, our sovereign, whatever language you want to use. President just sounds too lowly. Chairman of the board, that's also not such good, right? So kings and queens, at least that gives you a sense that we don't have so much in today's world. Right? So, and then depends upon what's going to come after that. Now, I gave you an outline of the Shabbat prayer service. And I pointed out then, and I'm going to send you an outline of the daily service. It's really a copy of something I put together many years ago for my synagogue, which has got page numbers for the daily service in both the Art Scroll and the Koran Siddur, which I believe are the ones pretty much being used around these days. Okay. But I want to look at part of that. Let me see here. Share screen. Okay. Now we're starting after the preliminaries. Right? We have blessings that come before. This is the morning service. So this is the Baruch Hu. We come summoning to people to pray. And the first blessing, there are two blessings, two brachot that precede the Shema. The first one is relatively long when it goes through a number of pages in the Siddur. And it opens up the prayers preceding the Shema. So we have the standard formula. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Right? Praised, they translate as blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe. Then, this, by the way, is from Sefaria. You can get online if you want all kinds of Hebrew and English texts. Sefaria.org. It's all free. This is for the morning service. So in the morning service, we before the Shema, which ideally is supposed to be recited right around sunrise. We praise God, Yotzer Or, who forms light, creates light, Uvarei Choshech, creates darkness, Oseh Shalom, makes peace or maker of peace, Uvarei et HaKol, and creates everything. Right? Now it's very interesting. This is a slight paraphrase from a line in the prophet Isaiah, because Isaiah says, Yotzer Or v'choshech oseh shalom uvarei et hara, and creates the evil. Isaiah is emphasizing that there is but one God. If there's but one God, then he must be the source of everything, good and evil. But the rabbis felt that perhaps that's not the exact way we want to start our morning service, by talking about evil and God is the source of evil. But according to the Talmud, everything that happens in this world is a result of the divine will. We can talk about that more later on. Okay, I'm going to just look at their English. All right, so this is an introduction to the idea of the sun and the moon and the light of the world. So he said, their translation, he illuminates the earth and provides light for those who dwell on it with compassion. And his goodness renews every day continually. Now, this is actually a statement of theology, right? That he renews the world every day. It says, if you think about it, that the world exists because God renews it. Were it not for God, the world would not exist. As Maimonides says, if you could imagine such a thing, if the world did not exist, God would exist. But if God did not exist, the world would not exist. So in his goodness, he renews every day continually the work of creation. How many are your works, Adonai? This is another modern issue. What do you, when you say this, do you say Adonai? Do you say Lord? Do you say Hashem? Different answers to that question. Here they choose to use the word Adonai instead of the name or Hashem or the Lord. You made them all with wisdom. The earth is full of your possessions. The king who alone is exalted from then, who is praised, glorified, and uplifted from the beginning of time. Eternal God, in your abundant mercy, have compassion on us, Master, who is our strength, rock, who is our stronghold, shield of our deliverance. Be a stronghold for us. Protect us, look over us, make sure that we're cared for. The blessed Almighty, great in knowledge, prepared and made the rays of the sun. The good created everything for the glory of his name. The luminaries set around his strength. The chiefs of his host are holy beings, the exalters of the Almighty. Continually recount the glory of the Almighty and his holiness. Be blessed, Adonai, our God, for the excellent works of your hands and for the light-giving luminaries which you formed. They will glorify you forever. We're going to come back to this in a minute because this is relating to the vision of Isaiah in the temple. When Isaiah, and we'll see that when we look at the prophets, that Isaiah has a vision of God surrounded by angelic beings who recite some the Kadusha that we'll see in a minute. All right. Be blessed, our creator, former, our king, and our redeemer, creator of holy beings. This is a reference to the divine beings, the angelic beings. Praise be your name forever, our king who forms ministering angels, and whose ministering angels all stand at the height of the universe and proclaim with reverence in unison aloud the words of the living God, King of the universe. All of them are beloved, all of them are pure, all of them are mighty, and all of them perform with awe and reverence the will of their possessor. And they all open their mouths in holiness and purity with song and music. They bless, praise, and glorify, and revere, and sanctify, and proclaim the sovereignty of. That's where they stop. All right. Now, again, this relates to the vision that Isaiah has. You know, the ancient world, the ancients looked upon God the same way as we would look upon kings and queens and emperors. And the fact of the matter is, you don't see a king all by himself or a queen by herself. There's always a retinue. There's always people, followers, servants, all kinds of entities surrounding the king and the queen, whatever. So when they speak about God, the Holy One, praised be he, their image, similarly, it must include some kind of retinue, some kind of beings that were around the Holy One, praised be he, that befit his stature. I see them all as symbolic. We don't have to believe that there are actually these creatures running around with halos over their head and lyres and wings on their back and white robes, which, by the way, is not how they're usually described in the Bible in any way. In the Bible, most of the time they're described either as some fantastical entities or just people looking like you and me. All right? So they revere and sanctify and claim the sovereignty of the name of the Almighty King, the great, the mighty, the awesome one, holy is he. And they all take upon themselves the yoke of divine sovereignty, one from the other, and give leave to one another to sanctify their former in a spirit of serenity with clear speech and pleasantness. All exclaim Kedusha in unison and reverently exclaim, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot Melech Haaretz Kevado, holy, holy, holy is the Adonai of hosts. The fullness of all the earth is his glory. So this passage is from Isaiah. So Isaiah has this vision in the temple in Jerusalem, or the heavenly temple, it's not clear. God is surrounded by these beings, 6 wings beings. With 2 they fly, with 2 they cover their feet, and 2 they cover their faces, so they too cannot see God. And at a certain point, they recite these words, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. And according to the tradition, the mystical tradition that surrounds this passage, every day, the angelic beings recite this passage. And we are commemorated with our own recitation of it here and now. And it goes on to say in the Ophanim, this is another kind of heavenly entity mentioned in the Tanakh, in the Bible, in the Holy Chayot, the holy beasts. The mighty sound rise toward the seraphim, the fiery beings. Facing them, they offer praise and say, Baruch Kvod Hashem Mimkomo, blessed the glory of Adonai from his place. To the blessed Almighty, they offer pleasant melodies. To the King, the Almighty, who is living and enduring, they utter hymns and make praises heard. Right? So the angels on high are doing this. We on earth are also going to be doing this. So in a sense, we're emulating the angels, at least according to most interpretations. He alone is a performer of mighty deeds, maker of new things, master of battles, sower of acts of righteousness, cause of deliverance to sprout forth, creator of cures, awesome in praise, master of wonders. Now, all of these praises, all of these things, God doesn't need to hear them. But I think the idea behind it is that we need to hear them. We need to understand that there is something above and beyond this world, the source of goodness in the world, the source of righteousness in the world, the source of the world itself, and one to whom we can turn when we are in need. Right? He renews his goodness each day, continuously. The work of creation, as it said, give thanks to him who made great luminaries, for his kindness is everlasting. Shine a new light upon Zion, and may we all soon be privileged to enjoy its brightness. And may there be a restoration to the God's kingdom on earth. Blessed are you, Adonai, former of the luminaries. If you want to know what the major theme of a blessing, of a bracha, at least the longer blessings, it is usually the last few words before the Baruch Atah and the conclusion of that blessing, Baruch Atah, former of the luminaries. So if you wanted to know what this basic paragraph that we've read, this blessing is, it's referencing God as creator of the sun and the moon. At night, we have a slightly different version of this, talking about day turning to night, and the luminaries there as well. Now, there's another important element in the prayer, way it's created. When there are a series of blessings that are related to each other, they form a unit. Only the first blessing of that unit begins Baruch Atah Adonai. The other members of that unit do not begin that way. They will end Baruch Atah, but they open with just whatever statement that is part of that blessing, of that prayer. Ahava Rabba Vatanu, with everlasting love, you've loved us, Adonai our God. The great and abundant pity, have you pitied us, our Father, our King? For the sake of your great name, for the sake of your forefathers who trusted in you. Sorry about that. Where was it? Our Father, our King, for the sake of your great name, for the sake of our forefathers who trusted in you, whom you taught statutes of life, carry out your will with a perfect heart, so to be gracious to us and reach us, our Father, merciful Father, who acts with compassion, have compassion on us, and put into our hearts comprehension to understand, to be intellectually creative, to listen, to learn, to reach, to preserve, to practice, and to fulfill all the words of instruction in your Torah with love. Enlighten our eyes in your Torah. Cause our hearts to hold fast to your commandments and unify our hearts to love and fear your name. And may we not be subject to shame, disgrace, or stumbling forever. For in your holy name, great, mighty, awesome, have we trusted. May we exult and rejoice in deliverance. And may your mercy, Adonai God, and your abundant kindness never forsake us. Hasten and bring upon us blessing and peace quickly from the four corners of the earth. Like the yoke of the nations from our neck, and speedily lead us upright to our land. Because you are the Almighty who performs acts of deliverance. And you have chosen us from among all peoples and tongue, and you have brought us near to our King, to your name forever in truth, with love, that we may give thanks to you and proclaim your oneness with love and love your name. Blessed are you, Adonai, who chooses his people Israel with love. So this paragraph speaks of God's love for Israel, the Jewish people. And that love is expressed in the giving of the Torah. And we ask God to help us to fulfill the words of that Torah. And we use the phrase, which is often misconstrued and by many people, of the idea that God chose the Jewish people, Asher bacharban mikol ha'amim, who has chosen us from among all the peoples. Being chosen doesn't mean we have given life on a silver platter. After all, our tradition says that the nations of the world only have Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, only the 7 commandments of Noah that they have to obey. And we have the 613. That hardly sounds like a good deal to me. So what the rabbis see it as meaning is there's a special relationship we have with God. He expects more of us than he expects of others. Therefore, we will be punished more than others will be punished. But when we do right and we worship God and follow his path properly, we bring the whole world closer to the divine. Right? And so this serves as the introduction to the Shema and the V'ahavta. And notice the word Ohev, Amo Yisrael, loves his people Israel. The word is Ahava, love. You brought us to your great name in truth, to give thanks to you, to unify your name, or to sanctify this one in love. Praise you, Lord our God, who chooses people Israel in love. And that's why, because in the opening of the Shema, after we have, which we've talked about before, God is one and indivisible, all of those things. Then after the first line of the Shema, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we are told, V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your possessions. We talked about this before. Right? So we connect this paragraph, which is a paragraph from the Torah itself, to the above paragraph, which is a rabbinically created blessing. And the word ahava, love, bridges those two paragraphs. Right? And we have in this first paragraph that we're supposed to use them as for signs on our hands and between our eyes, the tefillin, which we'll talk about next time, and the mezuzot on our doorposts. The next paragraph of the Shema is one in which expresses the idea that what we do has effect upon the world around us. Some modern scholars like to use the terminology of Deuteronomy, of the Deuteronomic theology. That is, if you obey my commandments, which I command you this day, then he expresses what they are: to love the Lord your God and serve him with your entire hearts, entire souls. I will give rain for your land in its proper time. The land of Israel is a land that doesn't have lots of rivers and lakes, but is very highly dependent upon rainfall. So God's blessings are very much described in the agricultural terms of rain in its proper time. If for a farmer, you need rain to fall at the right time. After you don't want it to fall when you have to plant, because that makes problems. You don't want it to fall when you're trying to harvest, because that creates problems and can spoil the grain. You want rain in between those two times. And so if it comes too early, it comes too late, it can cause lots of tsuras, lots of troubles. So if we obey God, he says, I will give rain in your land in its proper time. The early rains and the late rains, you'll harvest your grain, your wine, your oil, put grass in your field for your cattle, and you eat and be satisfied. Beware lest your hearts be swayed and you turn astray and you worship alien gods and bow to them. And Adonai's fury will blaze among you, and he will close off the heavens. There will be no rain, and the earth will not yield its produce, and you will perish swiftly from the good land which the Lord gives you. The idea repeatedly in biblical theology and also repeated in rabbinic teaching is that the land of Israel is a gift of God to the Jewish people on condition that the Jewish people live up to the divine commands. If the Jewish people do not live up to those divine commands, they can lose the land. And that's used to explain the destruction of the first and second temples, that Israel in somehow manner went astray. And again, we have the commandments as teaching their children and to saying when we get up and when we go to bed, writing on the doorposts and our mezuzot. And then the last paragraph of the Shema, this is still biblical now. We cite the passage that talks about the tzitzit, the ritual fringes on the corner of the garments, on the talit, and then also a reminder that God took us out of the land of Egypt. All right, then following the Shema in the daytime, we have a third blessing. Since it's part of that series of brachot, the series of blessings, it doesn't begin with Baruch Atah. It begins in true and firm and certain, true and certain, enduring, upright, faithful, beloved, and cherished, desired, pleasant, awesome, mighty, correct, and acceptable. Good and beautiful is this affirmation to us for all eternity. Sometimes we moderns get bothered by repetitious language. Here it's not repetitious, although it's the same idea just being said in different words. But the ancients understood repetition as important and as being a good quality, not a negative one that is often associated with modern literary approaches. So we acknowledge this. As we notice, it's true that the God of the universe is our king. The stronghold of Jacob is the shield of our deliverance. He lasts throughout the generations. His name lasts forever. His throne is confirmed. His sovereignty and faithfulness will last forever. Right? Upon the first and last generations, the matter is good and everlasting. His true and faithful law that will never be abrogated. Truly, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, our King, King of our fathers, our Redeemer, Redeemer of our ancestors, our former rock of our deliverance, our liberator and our savior, which is your name from old, and there's no God besides you. You have always been the help of our fathers, a shield and deliverer to his children. This idea of shield, Magain, we'll see that in Moshiach. Shield and deliver, we'll see that's next week in the opening of the Amidah. All right. Uh, We just can get down to the conclusion. We praise God. We recite this passage here is taken from the book of Exodus, from after the story of the flood. And since we're referencing to that song, we're saying with the new song, the redeemed people praise your name, or the people will praise your name upon the new redemption. Just like in that one, God shall live forever, reign forever. Zur Yisrael, Rock of Israel, arise to the aid of Israel, liberate Judah and Israel, as you promised, our Redeemer, Lord of hosts is his name. The Holy One of Israel, blessed are you, Adonai, who redeemed Israel. So once again, this concluding words, who redeemed Israel. Just real quickly, because I don't want to spend time on that, we have at the end of the first paragraph of the Amidah, praise Adonai, shield. First of all, King, helper, deliverer, and shield. Blessed you, Adonai, shield of Abraham. Okay, so we have that crossover of that language from the prayer of the blessing of the Shema to the blessing, first blessing of the Amidah. Okay. All right. Any questions about what we did tonight?
I did have one, and it kind of goes back to how you started to when you were talking about like how the art scroll has one interpretation, like when you were mentioning earlier about the Parsha. But I remember so during the high holidays, because I attend out of Israel, but we did a special Shabbat Hazanut where we went to Beth Emeth, and then the following week they came to us. And I noticed when we were at Beth Emeth, they used the art scroll Siddur, versus out of Israel, we use the Siddur Hadash.
Right.
And I was just wondering, like, in terms of variations to some of these sort of staple prayers, like the Shema, the Amidah, like the slight variations and differences, how are those sort of decided, or do they have like local significance versus if you're in Israel, if you're not?
I'll give you a little brief history. At the beginning, well, when we talk about reform, we'll see one of the most important elements of the early reform was to create new prayer books, new Siddurim, which they slowly took out traditional language in Hebrew. The conservative movement until the 1940s, pretty much used Orthodox prayer books. Then the committees were set up through the Rabbinical Assembly, which is the grouping of rabbis, to come up with a Siddur that they felt was more appropriate for use in conservative synagogues. And that was known as the Silverman Machzor and the Silverman Siddur. It has some differences. Most importantly, eventually the opening blessings. Remember that I said that the Shelo Asani Isha did not make me a woman. That was replaced. Not make me a Gentile was replaced in these prayer books. The references to sacrifices were minimized. The Musaf Amidah, instead of calling for restoration of sacrifices, was a memorial for the sacrifices that used to take place. In the late 60s, early 70s, there began more attempts to deal with changes in attitudes, at least with some elements of the conservative movement. They came out with a new Machzor, then that was revised, the revising. The daily prayer book was revised and revised again. And Toronto, to put on the map, Toronto until recently was pretty much in the orbit of the most traditional approach in the conservative movement. So when I came to Toronto in '94, all of the synagogues did still use the Silverman Siddur, even though other Siddurim had been introduced, and used most part the old Silverman Machzor. even though the rabbis were not happy with language, mostly with the English language, not with the Hebrew so much. It was archaic, etc. And so there was an attempt to create a new Shabbat Siddur that would meet the needs of the congregations here in Toronto. And so the Siddur Chadash was brought into being. And that was used in most of the conservative synagogues in town. I don't know whether or not Beth Emet used it at first or not. I don't recall. Beth Emet is on the far right of the synagogues in Toronto. And so we see that the art scroll has been more accepted there in their community. And a lot depends upon the rabbi and the ritual committee and who gets pushed which direction. And similarly, when prayer books, the creation of a prayer book is an interesting question, because who decides what goes in, where, what, and things like that. And those are often given to fights and disputes, what have you. But the traditional Siddur, and the Koran is just a version of the traditional Siddur, because that's usable basically everywhere in Ashkenazic synagogues. There are very minor differences here and there that sometimes was because of a printer at some point. We know that in the 17th century that there were some rabbis who thought the grammar was not exactly the way it should be in some parts of the Siddur, and putting grammatical changes, most of which about 99% of the people have no idea what we're talking about. But the major text, the basic text did not change. Only with the coming of Reform and then conservative and Reconstructionists and other groupings in the Jewish world was an attempt to reform in various ways the traditional prayer book, the traditional Siddur. Usually done through committee, which is where a camel comes from, right? The camel.
And so like the is it common? Because I know like you mentioned Beth Emet is more on the right, so I noticed that they only use the art scroll every time that I've been there. But in terms of like at Earth Israel, for the high holidays, we still use the Silverman Machzor, but then we just switched our weekday Siddur to Sim Shalom, but we still use the Siddur Hadash on Shabbat. So it's like all over the place. And if there's different decisions and different periods in conservative history.
I once did a comparative of, I did a paper trying to compare some of the Siddurim, what changes were made, what weren't made, what have you. That's a good way to have a fight. You know, I'm a traditionalist. I'm very happy to use traditional words, although I've become a fan of the Vilna Gaon, so I use his text some places, which is not the way it's done in Art Scroll. Really, until the modern era, it was just what came down the path. There was no attempt to create a Siddur. The Siddur was a Siddur. Whatever was there was there. You know, there might be some minor variations because of locations and word differences here and there. But for the most part, the Ashkenazic Siddur, for example, was the Ashkenazic Siddur. The Poles had a slightly different version from the Germans, and the Eastern may have had some differences here and there, but the bulk was the same. Only after the printing press comes into being, only when rabbis start feeling they need to correct some of the text of the Siddur, do we start to see some changes. When the Reform movement begins and the other modern movements begin with different theologies and different visions of the world, they feel that they need to change the language of the prayer book to meet those visions. The earliest conservative movement, for the most part, thought they could just reinterpret some things. Some things did have to go, they thought. but for the most part, we're satisfied with the traditional Siddur. Like I say, since the 70s, there have been 1, 2, I think 3 machzorim since the 70s put out by the conservative movement. And there have been at least 3, I think 3 versions of the daily prayer book. What used to take centuries to change now takes a generation or even less to change. And I predict that in the non-Orthodox world, non-traditional world, with the advent of tablets and iPads, you will be able to go to a synagogue and download that day's prayer book and pray from that prayer book. And tomorrow you might have a slightly different prayer book. The Reform movement, for example, the Reform Siddur, they have various different services for each service. For the Friday night service, you have 4 or 5 different services you can use. Some of them are very different from the others. And if you want, you can write your own prayer book and create your own synagogue, and your own movement, and ordain your own rabbis and have all that fun. Or you can find some place that looks for what you want to be okay and go with them and live with whatever difficulties you may have here and there. And talk to your rabbi if you don't like a wording here or there in the Siddur. Maybe he or she can explain it differently for you. I've got about 60 different Siddurim. I used to collect Siddurim. I love the different, they're all different a little bit. And commentaries and different things there. So I got several bookshelves full of Siddurim, all traditional ones, not talking about the modern ones that are out there. We're going to say the same thing when we come to Haggadah come the spring. Okay, anybody else? Okay, everyone. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope to see everybody next week. Stay well, stay healthy, keep away from getting any kind of illnesses.